Welcome to episode number 81 of the Maximizing E-commerce podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about 2021, planning for next year. So as I record this, a lot of people might be thinking, well, or as I record this, it's almost the holidays. In fact, I'm about 10 days away as I record this from the Black Friday, which is usually what we think of as the beginning of the holiday selling season. So that's just right around the corner. And so, for a lot of us, that could kind of sometimes even make or break the year. In fact, the reason they call it Black Friday is because back in the days of retailers wouldn't actually be solvent. They would be in the red um, until Black Friday. So the whole year was basically paying for the cost, and then the profits didn't really come until, the end of November and into December. So it was just how important it was for those retailers. So today we're going to be talking about how you can prepare yourself for going into next year, because even though this year is not over, well, January 1st is going to be here before we know it. And I think sometimes the beginning of a new year just kind of creates a nice little reset. I've said this before on this podcast and other places. I'm not a huge fan of, having all of our goals center around um, New Year's. I think it's kind of an artificial thing, because a lot of times we have New Year's resolutions and then forget about them. But as a business owner, I think we do need to plan in some sort of time periods, whether it's years, months, days, hours. We have to plan out something in front of us. Otherwise, it could just be that, I've talked about before the flashing cursor, and the flashing cursor is probably one of the most dangerous things when you're just sitting in front of a computer, whether there's actually a flashing cursor or not, trying to decide what to do. That's generally not effective. And so it's almost like we have two parts of our brain, the CEO function and then the worker function. And so when before you start assigning tasks to worker, you should sit down as CEO and kind of decide what it is you want to do. So what I want to get into just real quick is some thoughts on 2020. And so 2020, it's been an interesting year. I don't have to go into all the craziness that's happened this year. We could be finishing the year on a lot of craziness as well. So I don't want to get into that because I think we all know what it is. But what I do want to say is I think sometimes we've given a lot of power. And I'm going to say myself when I say we, I'm included in this, where at times it's like, oh, 2020, like, you know what? We're giving power to a year, to a number. And the number is based on, our calendar system. And the crazy thing is, it's not the number. It goes back to the whole thing with poker. And, if you're playing cards, it's not the hand that you're dealt, it's how you decide to play it. And so I just want to talk a little bit on 2020, because if you think everything's just going to be better when you get to 2021, unless you have the right mindset, I can promise you it's not going to be. And so there's a old parable or story, or however you want to phrase this, that I've heard a few times before in the self-development world. And that goes something along the lines, I'm going to probably butcher it, but trust me, there's a point to this. So a man's leaving a village, and he's leaving the village and he's walking on a path, and then coming the opposite direction towards the village is a traveler. And the traveler says to the man who's leaving the village, oh, are you just now leaving this village? And the man who left the village said, yes, I did. And then the traveler says, oh, I'm actually heading towards that village. What are the people like in that village? And the man who left the village said to the traveler, oh, where are you coming from? And he says what village he was coming from. And then the man asks him, oh, okay, well, what were the people like at the village where you just came from? So the man who left the village asked the traveler, what were the people like at his last stop? And he says, oh, there's just nothing but dirty, rotten scoundrels, just terrible people. Oh, just the worst of the worst. And so the man who left the village, the first man I referred to, says to him, well, you know what? The reality is you're going to find nothing but those type of people here. So best of luck to you when you get to the village. And so that man, the traveler, kind of like storms off like, oh, it's just going to be another, whole set of crazy people. So then the man who's leaving the village continues down his path as he's leaving the original village that we alluded to. Probably should have names of these people and the villages, but we'll just keep continuing. So the original man is walking down the path, getting farther and farther away from the village. Someone else is going towards the village and stops him, going the opposite way. It says, "Oh, excuse me, did you just come from that other village?" And our original friend here, who this is now the second person who stopped him, says to him, "Yes, I did just leave that village." And then this traveler says to him, the second traveler here, says, "Oh, okay, what are the people like in the village?" And he says the same thing he said to the first traveler and says, "Oh, well, what are the people like in the village where you just came from?" He goes, "Oh, they were just the most warm-hearted, kind people, just the best of the best. Like everything, just like I'm gonna miss those people. They were just so great." And he looks at this traveler and says, "You know what? You're gonna find nothing but those type of people here." And so the moral of the story is seek and you shall find. Um, and so it's one of those things that if we're going out seeking, thinking, oh, everything's going to be better just arbitrarily, it's not. But if we condition ourselves to look for the good, we will find the good. And so if we are leaving 2020 thinking, oh, 2020 is terrible, we're going to find the same terrible stuff in 2021, probably. Even though the circumstances might be different, the names might be different, the situations may or may not be different, but we will find ourselves in a situation where we will be kind of like it'll feel like old news. Like our results, I should say, will probably start to mirror one another in some regards. And so what it comes down to is, there's that old saying, this I'm starting to just get into platitudes here of, it's not that the grass is greener on the other side of the fence or the other side of the street, however you want to look at it. The grass is greener wherever you water it. And so if you're listening to the audio podcast, you're not going to be able to see this, but if you're on YouTube, you can see where I've got here is two circles. So if you're listening to this, just imagine two circles kind of next to each other where there's a little bit of an overlap. And so this is borrowed from Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things he talks about is when you're trying to be effective and figure out what to focus on, that you got basically two things to think about. You've got what you're concerned about and what you're able to influence. And so your concerns might be politics, might be who's going to win the Super Bowl, might be uh, something, maybe what your boss thinks about you, or something about, what are the results going to be in your business or something like that. Like things that maybe you don't necessarily have a lot of, or you may or may not have control over. Let's just say that. And then there's what you can influence, and that's the things you can put in on the front end. Like you can't necessarily affect the way someone perceives you, but you can affect what you put out there that might contribute to their perception. And then from there, it's, you've done your job, so to speak. Or you might plant seeds to grow your business, and you can't control the results of what's going to happen, but you can at least control the things you do to grow along the way. And so you want to basically focus on that intersection between the things you're concerned about and the things you can influence, because there's also things you can influence that maybe are just meaningless and maybe they don't have a big impact. So it's the impactful things too. I should probably draw another circle, which I don't remember if he had in his, where the things that are the most impactful. So that is really where you want to get to. So as you're thinking through, next year, I think it's important to think of kind of like, what is the most immediate hurdles after the new year, and then what's going to be the things that are going to have an impact on your results for the year of 2021. And also knowing you can make course corrections. You're not putting anything in stone where it's like, oh, I'm stuck with this in August, and I realized I totally fouled this up. And that's okay. We can redo, as long as we're not getting stuck in shiny object thinking, we can redecide the things we want to focus on. So basically what you want to think about is, what are your peak periods, and focus on, how does it affect your supply chain? So some things coming up. For example, Chinese New Year. So if you are importing goods from China Chinese New Year every year is going to have a big impact. Basically, it's almost like an entire country with over 1 billion people is almost completely shut down. Good luck getting orders placed. Good luck having factories work on your orders. Good luck getting stuff out of the country. It's almost just like they just kind of, everyone just goes home, because it seems like they all travel to find a different job, but then they go home for a month and then they go back to work after that. And so they get behind on orders. And then there's also a big push to get stuff out of the country. So it's not just you and I who are thinking about this, but pretty much anyone who's ordering goods from China. So think about that. Like, you know, it's going to be in February. Um, so how is that going to impact you and the orders you have to place? Because really you're thinking about not just restocking from the holidays, but really probably getting you through until like April or May, depending on what your cycle looks like from the time you place an order to the time you get it. So if you think about, like, if you place an order in December, and then they ship it like in January, and you get it, you know, while there, as long as it left the country, you should be good. Um, that now all of a sudden, you know, whatever you have is going to carry you for a while, because for that month blackout period, essentially, there's no placing orders in China. So think about that. That's something you want to think through. Then, you know, what are your peak periods? So I know that there's some people that, you know, I've worked with in you know, my consulting business, you know, where I help people grow internationally, that some people, I'm amazed at how many people like have spring related products. I don't want to give away any type of niches, but I know there's a lot of products out there that are spring related. So like for me, my peak season is the holiday season with my business. But then there's a lot of people that, you know, they get a bump at the holiday season because a lot of people are out shopping online. They're not really out shopping, they're on their phone shopping or in their computer shopping, whatever the case is. But they get a bump around the holiday season, but their big peak season might be the holiday season, or the big peak season might be back to school, or whatever it is for your business, you know, either based on history or if you're relatively new to the niche. You know, kind of just getting a sense of intuitively what does it look like, or if you're not 100% sure, you can always go on like Google Trends and look and see like what are, you know, searches at least on Google looking for, you know, that related type of product, and, you know, things of that nature. So you want to look at, start planning out, when do you need to place those orders, because you don't want to be caught where all of a sudden, you know, you're doing this almost kind of like just in time supply chain, where it's like you're getting the goods right before your peak season. And I've been caught with my proverbial pants down, so to speak, not literally, but basically, uh, you know, am into the holiday season and I'm starting to get a big order coming in, and it's not just like a replacement order, it's stuff I probably should have had a few weeks earlier. So this year I was a little bit more careful to plan it out ahead of time. So start thinking about that now for whatever your peak seasons are. Even if you're not going to place the order, you have no idea how much you want to, you know, order for Q4 2021, but at least have in the back of your mind, when should you be at least looking at that? You know, maybe it's in July you start evaluating, and maybe you place an order in early August, you know, depending on what that looks like. So that way you're giving yourself plenty of time and you're not scrambling. So that way you kind of have at least kind of outlined what are some peak time periods where I need to look at ordering, you know, making sure I'm not, you know, uh, caught off guard by things that happen every year, like Chinese New Year, or your, you know, peak cycle is coming up and then you forgot to place an order in time, which, you know, we've all been guilty of, but it's one of those things you get in front of now while you still have the time to react. Then you want to start thinking about goal setting. You know, what is it you want to do? So really, when you think about it, if you want to grow your sales in e-commerce, it's as simple as have more people to talk to about your product, or even if you're not talking to them, more people see your offer, I should say. And then at the same time too, you want to have, um, more products to sell. So if, as long as you have people who are willing to give up the money, the value of the money they have, because what you're selling them is more valuable to them than that money that they have, you're going to do well. So you want to find more ways to have more people and more offers of more products. Now, offers of more products can be expensive, but, you know, start thinking about what opportunities do you have to sell. So, you know, are you creating a brand? Are you a, you know, selling one-off products? Like you've got, you know, uh, a garlic press and you're selling tennis balls or something that you've created. So like they're not necessarily close to each other, they're not adjacent to each other, they're not in the same niche, you're just kind of selling things on their own. I personally think it's better long term to be selling things somewhat branded because you could get repeat customers, especially as people start to get familiar with your brand. We tend to go with what we're comfortable with as people. I tend to be a little bit of a creature of habit myself. You know, I like at least in Amazon, for things I'm reordering, I tend to go back and reorder the same things, even if they're not even things that are necessarily consumable. I've gone back and looked at something I purchased like 3 years ago and like, oh, I want to buy that again. And so, like, for example, I'll just use in my business. I just because this comes to mind, labels. I tend to buy the same labels over and over and over again. Um, just because it's easier. It's just one thing I don't have to think about. So uh, whoever's selling me those labels keeps getting me as a repeat purchaser because it worked. I'm happy with it. Could there be better labels? I guess, but it did the trick. So, you know, if I can tell you too, like with things I sometimes buy, like poly bags, I've bought a lot of the same brand of poly bags and previous too. So like sometimes if I have a new product and I need a poly bag for whatever reason for that product or a bundle that I'm putting together, I can have that product. I at least am comfortable putting that product into the same brand of poly bag that I'm used to. Hopefully that makes sense. And so, you know, what you want to do is think about what is the future of your brand, or even if it's one-off products, what are some products you think might be something you can sell in the future? Now, if you're wholesale, I understand the wholesale world, it doesn't always necessarily matter quite as much. I know there's even debate about this in the wholesale world of, you know, should you be selling similar type products or, you know, products that are completely unrelated? Does it really matter? Because you're not necessarily the brand owner, so it doesn't matter to you as much. You just want to, you know, however much money you have going out, you want X number of dollars coming back in. And so, does it really matter if you're selling potato chips and hockey sticks? Just throwing the random things I just thought of there. Um, then you want to start thinking about, you know, how do you get more people to see what it is that you're selling? And some of that is, you know, finding ways of selling what you have in other places. And so, you know, if you have your own store, you could start figuring out, okay, what are ways I could drive traffic? And maybe you want to have a goal for, you know, what are you going to do to drive traffic? It could be things that are long term, like maybe content. Content, I can tell you, is a good thing to invest your time in. It just takes a while before you start seeing results. But you probably also want some things that are going to be more short term results. So maybe it's doing Google Shopping ads or, you know, Facebook ads. If, you know, test something out, but try not to say, I'm going to test out everything. You want to try maybe what you think you're going to get the most immediate return on. And Google Shopping ads might be the next kind of thing for you if you're selling on Amazon, or you're at least used to Amazon, because Google Shopping ads are kind of, from my limited experience in it, but they're kind of like running Amazon auto campaigns. It's not exactly like, but probably the closest thing to analogize to. So, you know, you think about what are those things that you could do to drive forward and get more people to see your offers, whether on your own store or on Amazon. You know, what could you try? So maybe you're going to try different types of PPC. So maybe you want to do more sponsored brands, sponsored display, sponsored video, you know, different things you could do within Amazon to drive traffic. Then you want to start thinking of like, where is it else that you could be selling it? So, you know, marketplaces are a great thing. So a lot of people, you know, listening to this sell on Amazon. And so when I say Amazon, we're really talking about Amazon.com. And so you could be saying to yourself, okay, I could sell on Amazon.com, and at a certain point, you know, I could do things like optimize my listing, which I think would be a good thing, optimize your PPC, you know, find ways, you know, maybe you get new keywords or something so you can start driving traffic there. But you're going to hit a ceiling of you've optimized everything you can, which I think you should still continue to look at that as success is never final, especially when it comes to listing and sponsored products, any sponsored ads. Like you always constantly have to be optimizing, but your returns, um of growth start hitting a ceiling, especially if it's the same product. So unless the market for that product is increasing for whatever reason, um, then you're going to hit a ceiling. So you want to start finding other places you can sell it to. So, maybe it's something that makes sense to eBay or Etsy, or Walmart. Try something. Now, I wouldn't try every platform, because what I've tend to find is you start doing all this work to figure out a platform, another, off Amazon platform, another marketplace, and you realize, wow, I really did have it pretty good on Amazon.com. And you're having to learn a new way that customers think, a new algorithm, a new set of terms of service, just a new, in general, way things work. In fact, I remember my first sale on eBay. I was excited to get it, and then a few days later, the woman who purchased the product, I think it was all legitimate, but it was like she wanted her money back, very quickly, and it was like, well, that wasn't quite what I thought. So it was like, a little bit of a disconnect in, um, maybe how I positioned the product versus what people were expecting on eBay. So that's just something to think about. And then, as you're going into these other marketplaces, what does it look like in that marketplace? Then, what you want to start thinking of, is on Amazon. If you already understand Amazon, you could go into international marketplaces. Now, the tricky part is for a lot of folks is you have to figure out a whole new platform, and that could be the challenging part. And so, um, I just, shameless plug here. You could go to internationalchecklist.com. Again, internationalchecklist.com. I have a checklist where I walk you through step by step exactly the things that you would need to do to expand into other marketplaces, like Canada or UK. But I will say this, regardless of whether or not you use my checklist, or, I have a service where I do it for folks, whether you use my services or my checklist or whatever the case is, I think you should at least evaluate if it makes sense for you. Because if your products are selling on Amazon in the US and similar products are selling in Canada or the UK, it's not unreasonable to expect, 10, 15% for the same products that you'd get those sales in another country. And so sometimes people are like, well, that's not all that good. Well, go into Walmart, you might get 10, 15% if you're doing pretty well. eBay, generally people tend to find a lot smaller numbers, especially if it's the same catalog of products. So the nice thing is you're not having to figure out a whole new marketplace. And that's why I think selling on Amazon in Canada, UK is such a good thing, because once you kind of get the initial hoops you have to jump through to get like whatever registrations you need for Canada or the UK, it kind of runs somewhat on autopilot. Like nothing is totally passive income in this world. You still got to optimize PPC, but you don't have as many impressions. There tends to be less competition, so there's not as many people. There's not as much variability, I should say, and bids tend to be smaller. So as long as you got uh, your campaigns dialed in, generally speaking, I tend to find, and what a lot of my clients have found is once you're up and running, it kind of runs itself. You don't have to worry about it quite as much. It's like anything. There's a little bit of a ramp up period when you go into Amazon in another country, but it's fairly simple. So I would highly recommend, if you are not selling in Canada and UK, that you at least look at those two. You don't have to do them both at once. I mean, I have clients that I help launch into both of them, but for you, you're just saying to yourself, I want to just do it on my own. Going to Canada, the logistics are pretty simple. Then going to the UK, it's a little more complex, and there's a lot of changes they're making, due to Brexit and whatnot. So just pay close attention. Make sure you got a good person to help you figure out the VAT part for you. And so that should be a VAT accountant in the UK. I use a Vask. There's a lot of good ones out there as well. So, but definitely something to think about is, where are you selling and how can you get your offer to more eyeballs is really all we're trying to do. So we're trying to get more products and more offers. So I'm challenging myself on the offer side. How can I take, product A, B, and C and turn it into products A, B, C, D, E, so that way I have more versions or variations of a particular product, even if they're not parent child, you know, variations, that at least I have something else. So I could go to the same supplier and say, okay, I want to increase my purchases with you, but I want you to make small tweaks for me so that that way I have almost more shelf space. And if you think about, like, that's what Coca-Cola essentially does. Like, if you just walk down the soda aisle, how many different sizes and quantities of bottles and cans do they have of Coke? And then they have Sprite, and then they have Diet Coke, and they have all these other different things. And all the drink companies, they have all these different ways that they're trying to, it's not just like, here's the 2-liter bottle of Coke and that's it. It's, there's all these different options. And so how do you create different options for your customers? And so these are just little things I think are good things to ask yourself going into next year. Really start thinking about what are your goals, because, at the end of the day, we can't control what happens in 2021. We can only control the inputs that we put into it. Going back to the whole analogy of, the convergence of, what you're concerned about and what you can influence. And so if you focus in that area, you're going to be more effective, you're going to do better, and you're going to plant better seeds. And you got to plant lots of seeds if you want a good harvest. And so, yes, you're going to do certain things, and some are going to work out great and some are not going to work out, but there's only one way to know, and that's to test it. So I wish you the best in 2021, and I wish you the best in your e-commerce journey. And no matter what it is you're deciding to do, just try different things, have fun, and see what works for you. And I wish you the best. Take care.